Welcome back from lunch. I hope you guys obviously enjoyed it. For the people that are back, there's a few latecomers that are, of course, going to be joining us. But before we get started to our next session, which I'll be introducing, over lunch, so many people were asking me what this gift was. Yes? So some people were confused. What is it? Is it a USB? Does it charge my phone? They were guessing. What else were the guesses? It was a torch, maybe. Somebody asked me, is it a universal remote? No, it's not a universal remote. It's actually a mobile phone. It's a mobile phone. It's with a dual SIM card. It's a torch and a radio. So can I get a big hand of applause for the organisers for giving such an amazing gift? Thank you very much. Now, there's a couple of things that I need to remind you about. There's a survey that's going to be sent to you by SMS, if we can appreciate if you can respond to that, just to kind of give us an idea in terms of your feedback. There's also a raffle draw. You would have received a number on your way in. We're going to have a raffle draw at the end of the day. I hear there's some amazing prizes. And last but not least, our final session for today is actually by Antonio, which you don't want to miss. He's going to do a live hacking session. So he's actually going to hack an account live here on stage, which is a session you certainly don't want to miss. But up next, I want to introduce our first panel discussion, of course, for the two-day conference. It's going to discuss the subject about strengths and weaknesses of various security practices. I'd like to now invite our moderator. We've already got our panelists there on stage. Our moderator, Ali Al-Awadhi, is Specialist Quality Assurance for KNPC. He's a specialist working under the Engineering and Services Division in MAB Refinery. He holds several professional certifications as an expert in functional safety, maintenance, and reliability. So, Ali, I'm going to leave the floor to you.
Shireen, where are you going? I think nobody's listening, nobody's looking.
Really?
You still
I think
didn't
they
tell
are.
Me, you still didn't tell me your password, so.
What is your password? Now that I've watched that video, I'm not so gullible. I've got some sort of awareness. You tell me your password first.
Okay, then after the session.
After the session. Okay, done.
How vulnerable are we to cyber attacks? Are we as organizations in general and as industrial organizations in specific ready for such attacks? What about our systems and servers? All the way from the top, from our business networks, going down to my control networks. Now I see PCs and servers in my control networks. I'm an instrument engineer. I'm not an IT engineer, but I see PCs, I see servers. And even if I go all the way down to the field, smart, digital, microprocessor-based field devices. So what can we do as organizations? And do we need to redefine our roles and responsibilities with those who are involved with these systems? Do we need to develop more competencies, different skills? Good afternoon, and thank you so much for attending this sixth session, Strengths and Weaknesses of Various Safety Practices. I'm honored and deeply humbled to introduce my very special guest.
Hello.
I will start from the right.
Excellent.
I'll start with Mr. Husain Al-Bustan.
Thank you.
The team leader, IT management and security at KMBC.
Okay.
More than over 23 years of projects, initiatives, and experience in the field of IT. He held both Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Computer Engineering from Boston University. And he holds several professional certifications. I'm just going to mention some. MCSE, CNE, MCP+, PMP, and more. My second special guest, Mr. Arjan Meijer, consultant ICS security at Hudson, Cybertec. He has an extensive experience. It seems that he has been working in different sectors: food, oil and gas, critical infrastructure, and life sciences, so different experiences at different sectors. He's a seasoned security consultant specialized in cybersecurity for operational technology, OT. He had strong focus on network security and cybersecurity for the OT domain. Also, he's a subject matter expert certified by ISA as a trainer for ISA 99 and IEC 624443. My third special guest is Mr. Peter Reynolds, a process industry senior consultant and analyst with ARC Advisory Group. He has more than 20 years of professional experience in the process control, advanced automation, and information technology in the downstream sectors. He used to work for one of the largest refineries in Canada. At ARC, he has authored several market studies and published several white papers. So, gentlemen, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Husain Al-Bustan.
Okay.
So, Mr. Al-Bustan, we'll start with the first questions. And we received so many questions and queries asking about, we used to have, especially from the people in the fields, people with the control system, non-IT people. And they are saying that we used to work with proprietary closed systems, and now we are facing a reality. We are dealing with Windows-based systems. We have PCs with Windows. This is what we see. So what do you think, as the first questions, I'm going to start with you, and you have 2 minutes. What do you think as an organization, especially as KMBC, since you are working for KMBC, what do you think that we need to develop as far as the skills and roles and responsibilities and other activities that we are required to do?
Okay, thank you, Ali. Like you mentioned, the industrial control systems, previously it was managed purely by proprietary systems which were not connected to the internet, so they weren't really a cyber security type of threat. But today, with the new technologies and the updated systems, most of these systems have moved towards Linux or Windows, and they've become open systems and have integrated at the same time with the company's wide area network to gain remote access or to have other facilities integrate with web services to give management certain dashboards, remote and to monitor certain gauges in the refineries, which since now it is being connected and using open standards, which many people are familiar with, it poses more of a security threat in terms of hackers being able to discover vulnerabilities which are similar to the ones found in business systems, and they can use that to exploit even the process machines. And the process machines, because of their criticality, handling the refineries and all these controls, it becomes now a very serious issue, how to manage systems which are interconnected to the rest of the world and prone to hackers attacking it, while the people who normally managed these systems previously were people who are not IT based. So I think this kind of draws a line in where...
20 seconds.
Sorry, I think personally now maybe the IT has to be more involved in the server part of the managing the system, whereas the application part of controlling the refineries should be left to the process people to manage. This is my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Arjan?
Yes, thank you very much. People and technology in ICS security, it's always an interesting part to look at. I'm going to do it a little bit on my assessments that I've done. One thing I've noticed quite a lot is that there is no specific role in a lot of companies. Who is responsible for those systems, for the ICS security part? When you have a project and, for example, you're going to install a firewall, quite often the firewall is installed during a project, it is configured, but afterwards, who is responsible for maintaining the firewall? Because if the firewall has not been maintained, then actually it just have an allow all and an allow all in both directions within 2 or 3 years. So what's very important for people is have responsibility, that you know who is responsible. And on the other hand, that everyone in your organization has a basic understanding of cybersecurity. I mean, safety is a subject that a lot of companies already implement. Before you go on site, you need to take a test, you need to know what are the rules for safety and how to behave safely. But for cybersecurity, that's often not the case. And I think what could be very interesting for a lot of companies is to have some form of cybersecurity education, like the ISA 99, the Cybersecurity Foundational Specialist. The certificate brings you a basic knowledge that helps all of your people to understand cybersecurity, what is important, why is it important, what is the cybersecurity management system, and the basic technology. Because at the end of the day, getting all your people a basic understanding of cybersecurity is very important. to get a baseline on your cybersecurity and to make sure that everyone understands the technology and knows how to use it and knows how to handle it, both technically and organizational.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. And I've seen a couple of slides today that talked about the integration between IT and OT and bringing down barriers. But if you look at historically how automation systems have evolved, they've creeped over time. Back in 1990, there was the computer integrated model for how to develop networks and deploy applications to support a manufacturing facility. Beyond that, we've developed standards for ISA 95 and then finally ISA 99. So thank goodness for standards giving us the ability to help bring forth some progress in the area. But there's still gaps. What we find when we do research is there's still only basic guidance for how to set up the networks for ICS systems. There's still a lot of basic tools and procedures and things that aren't being done to secure these systems down at the lower level. And the other thing that I heard today was the importance of enabling the internet. And the internet is becoming closer and closer to IC systems all the time, whether it's a vendor doing remote managed services or whether it's a handheld device. So there needs to be certainly lots more effort in this area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Al-Bustan, let's go more specific now. What about network segmentation as applied to the industrial automation security? Can you please just tell us what are the strengths and weaknesses, if any, of the network segmentation?
Okay. Network segmentation, and in general, is the idea of grouping similar equipment in a specific segment and isolating other type of equipment in other segments, and basically just makes it incrementally more difficult to be able to reach the process machines because you have to be able to exploit vulnerabilities across multiple segments, which makes it less likely that hackers could manage to go through if the segmentation was done in a proper way, and so if the segmentation was done in a proper way, it will be the hacker will need to first exploit the first segment and then move on, travel to the second and third. So basically, the group of equipment sitting on the same segment are similar in nature. So if a vulnerability is found usually on a specific type of equipment, it would usually be set for that segment alone. It will not affect the other segment. And that's what makes it slightly more secure. The disadvantages probably is since the complexity of these segmentations and different zoning of the security, sometimes you have misconfigurations or sometimes you have requirements where you need to interconnect a certain device to a network management or remote control a certain device. So you have multiple security equipment which need to be configured between all these segments, and any mistake could actually jeopardize the entire security of that network.
So I agree, Abu Mahmoud, both as applied in the field of IT and the control system, the concept.
The concept is good if it is applied correctly and if you are sure that you have the right staff to manage the security across the devices and segmentation and be able to continuously audit it.
I see. Thank you, Mahmoud. Mr. Arjan?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, network segmentation is one of the basic measures that you should always have in your plans. That's one thing I'm convinced of. You should have a form of network segmentation to split devices and assets up into different logical divided groups. And that brings you a number of advantages, but also a number of complications. Last year I was giving a training, and there we had some quite interesting discussions about how to make those groups, how to make the zoning, how are you going to judge what should be together and what not? What is important for your business? What kind of equipment should be should function as a group together? That's one thing that's very important and very tricky when you're going to define zoning. If you look, for example, at monitoring, creating different zones segments your network, and the connections between them, as we call in ISA 99 the conduits, gives you a very nice opportunity to monitor traffic and to watch for strange things happening on your network. And that is one of the basic parts that you should also do to take advantage of the zoning. So it's not only about the zoning itself, but taking advantage that the zoning gives you. And that's, I think, is one of the most important things about zoning.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is deciding when to segregate and when not to segregate. If you apply risk management guidance to cybersecurity, you start to think about definitions within some of the more modern standards are very helpful. But I think where there's a gap in industry is figuring out from an application perspective which application goes on which network and why that is. So I think that there's still progress that's required in this area. Still and if you think about automation systems, the first computer systems were put down in the mid-70s. A lot of those architectures still exist today. So as much as we like to change out our monitors and our servers at the IT level, the automation systems that are actually running the plants in many cases have been in operation for over 30 years. So really there's a complication with the way we organize networks, and that is we're not just dealing with new things, we're also dealing with old things. So we need better guidance on how to manage the old and the new.
Thank you. Another key element of the industrial control system is the rigorous patch management. So again, could you please provide us an overview of the strength and weakness? If we apply it to the industrial environment, and this time I'm going to change the sequence, so I will start with you, Mr. Meijer.
Okay, perfect. Patch management, always very interesting to look at patch management. I mean, patch management, in my humble opinion, is something you should do, but be very careful of. I mean, implementing patch management wrong can do more harm than it helps you to get your plan up. And basically, it's about your business. Because cybersecurity is not being about security, it's about helping your business to continue in certain kinds of events, cyber events. So patch management can be helpful in some cases, but what is important to also understand the limitations. I mean, let's say, for example, you're going to install a patch. You should do that based on the risk that you find when performing a risk analysis. And if you have defined that a large portion of your risk is coming from a threat agent, like for example a nation state, they are probably not using vulnerabilities that are publicly known and therefore patchable. So the amount of defense that you get from patch management is very depending on who is trying to interfere with your system and who is trying to hack you, basically said. So it's very important. Patch management should be done. It should be done well, but it should take considerable time, because if wrongfully implemented, it can cost you a lot of money and problems. And if it's done correctly, it doesn't mean necessarily that it protects you against all the events that you want to be protected against.
I hope until this time I see some disagreement.
Well, I can't disagree. Patches is one of those things that if you ask an automation practitioner, why did we go to Windows? Because patches have created such a headache. And you think about the way patches are deployed. If you're the administrator of an ICS infrastructure at a refinery, you're receiving patches that are posted on the Microsoft site. So vulnerabilities are being identified by the enterprise. Your control system provider is providing patches to you to patch your system on a continuous basis. So that's one of those things that really adds to the headache if you're the administrator of a system. Arjan mentioned risk. I think that's really important. And during Kiox last year, there was a presentation about patch management, and I thought it was really good. It highlighted a statistic that, in this case, the decision to patch, the time it takes from that decision to when the patch is implemented was 30 days. And my first question was, what's my exposure? So if I'm running a refinery, patch management is just one of many different exposures and protection levels that I can employ in order to make sure that my plant is running safe. So I have seen some companies that are getting more sophisticated with assigning qualitative numbers and more scientific data on looking at patches, monitoring, USB, access, physical security, all of those things, and making a very educated decision before applying a patch.
I think patch management for industrial control systems is probably a very controversial topic, because usually these systems need to be supported by the vendors. And the vendors themselves don't usually want to patch it immediately, and sometimes it takes a while before they actually give you the green light to go ahead and patch it. So I do agree that you have more than one measurement of security to secure against hackers, but nevertheless, if something is left unpatched, it is a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, it just gives a window of opportunity for hackers to be able to exploit certain vulnerabilities, and the fact that you leave a system unpatched for a long period of time, like for instance, Microsoft probably releases patches every week. The vendor says don't patch, and they'll give you a response after a year, then you have a 1 year window of opportunity for hackers to be able to utilize these vulnerabilities and exploit these systems. So I think it is also the responsibility of the supporting vendors to test the patches themselves as soon as these patches are released, and not to give this long delay before approving them.
Thank you. Actually, we are facing, working in a refinery, we are facing the same challenge. So Microsoft introduced the release the patch, but we have to wait for the automation filter, and sometimes, as Mahmoud said, it takes like a year or 6 months, and that's a long period. Other releases will be issued, so you don't know. And we also have some other issues, like you do it online, you do it as a remote. So that's several issues. Thank you so much. The last questions I'm going to have, I'm going to start with you, Reynolds. In your opinion, what's after hearing these different techniques, and we talked about the evolution from the proprietary all the way to off-the-shelf or Microsoft-based automation system. So, in your opinion, and with your experience, what's the best strategy to implement for increasing the level of protections in our industries of these systems and networks?
Yeah, very good question. So I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of legacy systems that exist. So architectures, standards, databases, applications all tend to evolve and creep. So one of the most important things that often gets missed is organization and culture. And so it's hard work to do all this stuff. As we know, we're in this field, we deal with patching, we deal with threats, and most importantly, we're dealing with a very risky operation, and that's making hydrocarbon products. One experience that I've seen recently is I was approaching a gate and entering a building, and an individual with a mirror was going around the car to inspect underneath the car to see if there was any foreign objects. So it was physical security. Well, the individual wasn't looking at the mirror, he was looking up at the sky. So one of the most important things, it has to start with your people. So getting back to the presentation from the doctor this morning, it's about the human factors. So you've got to have the right people, you've got to have the right education, you have to develop your organizations with cybersecurity in mind. And that's not easy, especially when we've all evolved from Motorola 68040 or VAXs or proprietary computers, right? But we all have to deal with this IT now. And there are techniques that companies can use to benchmark and develop organizations and missions and attributes that have cybersecurity techniques in mind. So that's, I think, the most important.
Okay. Yeah, what's the best strategy to secure your plant? Well, this morning we've seen a presentation, and there were 3 blocks drawn: people, process, and technology. And I think that no cybersecurity can be implemented without balancing those 3 pillars: people, processes, and technology. So what is very important, as Peter correctly pointed out, people, you should make sure that they know what they are doing, but also that they are in support of what you're going to do in cybersecurity. Train them on what cybersecurity is. Get the awareness over, get them to know why you are going to implement things, and make sure that it happens. Secondly, the organization, and those are combined together. Recently, somewhat months ago already, but the client asked us to write a number of policies for their ICS environments to secure it. I said, well, how many? Well,
20, 30, just to make sure that everything is covered. I said, well, okay, how long do you think? Well, within a year, it's undoable. What we've actually done is create a small number of policies, but make sure that they work within your plant. We created policies, go to the people on site, explain why we did it, explain why the policies were needed, and then make sure that they were followed and helping them to follow those procedures. Because writing a policy and procedure is not that difficult. But making sure it is embedded in your company and embedded in the way you work, that's the most difficult part. And finally, technology. You should have technology measures that are helping your organization to stay secure from the risk that you measure, because eventually those policies, procedures, people and technology, they should all be balanced and based upon a good cybersecurity risk management.
I agree with the answers I heard. Basically, we need to update the skills, the people, the processes, the controls, and the technology. We can't neglect any part of it because these are the key factors in maintaining your security. But the main focus is probably the human factor, like we've heard maybe throughout the presentations and from the gentleman here. Our people have to be, at least the administrators, people who are focusing on the security, they need to be ready, always expecting the worst. They need to audit, they need to dig, see if there's anything going on that's suspicious. They should think like a hacker, you know, because if you don't know how the hackers come in and try to exploit your systems, you wouldn't be ready to protect against this hacking. So ethical hacking exercises, penetration tests, vulnerability tests should be run and should be done by the organization itself, and not reliant on external entities to come and do it annually, because you do it once a year, you have the vulnerabilities once every year, and your people won't learn anything. And I think there's a Chinese proverb which is to say, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So it is important that the organization builds the necessary skills to be able to do these vulnerability tests, penetrations, and ethical hacking techniques to ensure the security of their systems all the time.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have enjoyed as much as I enjoyed this special session with our special guests sharing their vast experiences. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stay around and ask them during the breaks. They will be here today and tomorrow. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Before we break, just because we do in fact have all of our panelists and speakers here, does anybody have a question already on hand? Yes, we do have one right at the front. I thought so. If I can get a microphone, please, right at the front.
Thank you, Salih. Question is about the future. We are moving toward the cloud, Internet of Things, big data. What impact about these new technologies in the industrial systems?
Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, the future. Actually, I'm going to run a little bit in front of my presentation tomorrow, but especially what intrigues me is the Internet of Things, or the industrial Internet of Things as it's called. I mean, nowadays people with a wrench install a flow meter into a plant. And they do that already for years, and they connect the wires and everything is okay. What we see now are flow meters, for example, which include an Ethernet connection, which have a web server. How are we going to handle that? And again, I think people, also your engineers, instrumentation engineers going in the field with a wrench should also be aware of cybersecurity. And that's why it's so very important to train your entire organization, because eventually everywhere in your plant, Ethernet or technology of that sort will pop up. Fails with Bluetooth, fails with Ethernet IP, and so on. So that's why it's very important to have the human factor, your policies and procedures supporting it.
But I'm sure you agree with me, it's a significant shift.
Yeah.
It's a big change. I mean,
Definitely, because those people are used to having metal and wrenches and big screws.
yeah, some of the problem from the fields, not from
But it is the company problem.
Reynolds?
Yeah, this is a subject I'm very passionate about, and it involves taking data outside the plant. And the next time you travel on your local airline, one of the most complex assets on that airplane is on the wing, and it's a turbine. So what the airline industry did a few years ago was they decided that they wanted to improve safety of all flights for all passengers. So the turbine or the engine that's on the airplane is connected to a satellite over public infrastructure. That satellite signal is transmitted to a company that services that turbine, and that company can perform analytics and be aware of the health in real time and report back to the pilot. So what's happening at the plant level, if you think about all of the risks that your operators are dealing with, sometimes operators can't quantify what's happening with their turbines, right? So the question is when do we take what the airline industry has already done and start to take that data and enable new service models? We think that data will actually leave the plant and you will be more secure because your assets will be better maintained. So the future is there's a cloud somewhere that has your data, you're connected over the internet, and like we heard this morning, that internet is getting closer and closer, and that's one of the areas that's really, really important.
That's it. Well, our panelists and of course our moderator will be around for the rest of the day and also tomorrow if you do have any further questions. I do advise definitely to pick their brain. But thank you so much once again, gentlemen. Can I get a big round of applause, please, for our panelists? Thank you for your time. And we're up next with our fourth keynote speaker, of course, for the day. And I haven't seen him around, but is Sinclair here? Yes, we do. Okay, before you come up, let me introduce you first. With over, of course, 35 years of experience in Honeywell, he's been active in networks and cybersecurity for the last 12 years. His current responsibilities include the quality and the content of technical processes, services, the skills, knowledge, training of the EMEA engineers, and as well as the presentation testing for quality and delivery. So can I get a big hand of applause? We'll be discussing now 40+ security standards for ICS and how do they help us. He's the technical lead for EMEA for Honeywell Industrial Cybersecurity. Big hand of applause, please, for Sinclair Coleman.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me. I'm going to talk about standards. I'm a technician, so I immediately have to apologize a little bit because technicians and standards are not really, always in the same food. Technicians like to do things different every time, like to improve every time, where standards generally improve every 5 years or maybe even longer. So sometimes we might be a little bit critical on the standard. Okay, we'll see. Next thing is I'm a very long time in process control. Fortunately, not so long in cybersecurity, only 50 years in cybersecurity. And that's basically because before that period, we didn't pay too much attention to cybersecurity. Proprietary environments, proprietary systems. So I started a little bit after 2000 working in that area. I contributed to standards. In my daily job, I do cybersecurity assessments and mitigation jobs, hands-on things. So I have almost daily to do with standards. And from that perspective, I'm trying to explain a little bit what the problems are today with standards, how they help us, and how they don't help us. I look at the standards. You might not see this because the shares are a little bit in the way of your picture. But I look at it at 4 different angles. First of all, I look at it, there are standards which are much directed to the end user and how to secure his plant, how to secure his control system. And there are other standards which are more toward defenders and what type of security requirements their equipment needs to have and what type of project requirements, how our project services should perform. And then that's kind of a split you can make, and you can also split looking at standards looking at the technical side and standards looking at more at the procedural, policy, organizational